Hi, and welcome to this small and quick tutorial about a couple of topics which I find really interesting, and I hope it'll be of help to someone who's either studying for their CWNA exam or studying for their CWAP exam or whatnot. To give a quick background, I had a problem with this topic and I thought I understood it well, but I always used to forget. That's because I never understood the basics of it clearly when I started reading it first. That was for my CWNA exam. So what I did now was today when I was reading the CWAP study guide, which I must say is an excellent book, I took down some notes and I paid a little more attention to these topics. And I must say these are fairly basic topics, and 9 out of 10 people might already know this. But if there is one guy out there whom it'd be of help to, that would satisfy the purpose of this video. So with that said and done, let's get started and have a look at what we're going to be talking about in this video. In this video, I'm going to be talking about two basic things. I'm going to be talking about the significance of the 2 bits in the 802.11 MAC header. And those 2 bits are the toDS bit and the fromDS bit. And we're also going to be looking at the 4 MAC addresses in the 802.11 frame. If you don't know already, the 802.11 MAC frame, or the MPDU, has 4 MAC addresses in it. Now, yes, I know you must be wondering, Ethernet has only 2, the source and the destination. So you must be wondering, why the hell do you need 2? 2 more, sorry. So I'm going to go ahead and explain that, and I'm going to show you how cool it is when you finally get to know both and you can link the functionality of the toDS and fromDS bits, as well as the meanings of the 4 MAC addresses present in the 802.11 MAC frame. So let's get started. First, let's talk about the significance and the meaning of the toDS and the fromDS bits. These are 2 bits which are present in the 802.11 MAC header, and these signify the direction in which the frame is passing, or the direction in which the frame is traversing. Before we start, I must apologize for how shabby this looks, because I don't have the patience to create a PowerPoint. So all I did was I just have a blank screen and I have my tablet. I'm just going to be playing around and explaining things to you the way I usually do in a class. So let's go ahead and have a look at the different combinations or the different permutations between these 2 fields, and let's see what it means. Let's start with the simple one. Let's say we have in a frame, okay, one thing I want you to keep in mind is, assume that you are in a Wi-Fi environment where you have a wireless LAN, you have an access point, and you have a client station. And you, being the wireless engineer, you've gone ahead and sniffed a packet. Now, imagine that you're inspecting the 802.11 MAC header in that packet, and keep that in mind as I go ahead and explain this to you. So let's take the first case. Suppose you see a frame with this particular combination where the toDS bit is set to 0 and the from distribution system bit is set to 1. What would this mean? Now, we all know that DS stands for the distribution system, or if you look at it in simple terms, it's the wired network to which you are connected through Wi-Fi. And your access point acts as a bridge between the wireless medium and the wired medium, and I'm sure all of you already know this. So if we go ahead and have a look at the toDS and the fromDS bit, where the toDS bit is 0 and the fromDS bit is 1, what this means is the frame that you have just captured is coming from the distribution system to the wireless client. So that basically means that your access point is taking the frame from the distribution system and sending it and encoding it over the wireless LAN and shooting it over to your client. So that's what this means. The toDS bit is 1, and in this case, the fromDS bit is 1. So now let's have a look at the other combination, or the other possibility here. The other possibility is the toDS bit is 1 and the fromDS bit is 0. And I'm sure you've all guessed it correctly. In this case, the frame that you have captured is going from the wireless client to the distribution system. By distribution system, don't think of it beyond the AP, just think of this as a frame going from your station to the access point. So this must be pretty clear to you by now. The 2DS bit combination of 0, 1 and 1, 0. Now it gets interesting. Let's have a look at the other two combinations. The other two combinations are 0, 0, where the 2DS and the from DS bits are both 0, and the combination of 1 and 1. I told you it'd get tricky, right? So let's have a look at the combination of 0 and 0. If you're going to be looking at control and management frames, we all know that these frames are always going to be exchanged only between the client and the access point. And that's where they end. If a client sends a management frame, let's say a client sends an authentication request to the access point, the frame stops there. The access point does not go ahead and forward that onto the distribution system unless we have a controller-based environment, which is different, and which you shouldn't be thinking about that at the moment. So in case of control and management frames, where the frames don't really have a destination, all they do is they go from the access point to the client and from the client to the access point. So in that case, for those particular control and management frames, the 2DS and the from DS fields are going to be 0 and 0. So if you go ahead and find a frame with the 2DS and from DS both 0 and 0, it's going to be either a control or a management frame. The data frames will always have 1 in one of these two bits. That means the data frames will either be from a DS or destined to a DS, or the special case of 1 and 1, which we're going to be talking about next. So now we have understood the three combinations of the 2DS and the from DS bits. Let's finally have a look at, in my opinion, the most interesting combination of 1 and 1. When we're talking about a 2DS and a from DS of 1 and 1, I'll give you a couple of seconds to think about this. When is it really possible for a frame to be originating from a distribution system and to be destined to a distribution system? That would mean that the frame had to be originated from a wired network, going to a wired network, but traversing through a wireless LAN. You got it correct. This would be a special case in case of something known as wireless distribution systems, and an example for that is a wireless bridge. What a wireless bridge is, it's nothing but a device, or let's say it's just an access point. We have two access points configured in bridge mode. Access point 1 and access point 2. Access point 1 is connected to its own wired network, as well as access point 2 as well is connected to its own network. The wired network connected to access point 1 is going to be the distribution system 1, and the wired network connected to access point 2 is going to be the distribution system 2. Let's say in our example we have a client station here. This is going to be my client. It looks pretty bad at the moment, but please bear with me. I suck at drawing. So we have a client in distribution system 1, and we have our streaming server in distribution system 2. So what would happen is, if this client wanted to access the server in distribution system 2, the client would need to send the frames over the wireless LAN. And this wireless LAN is going to be acting as the bridge, or to be more precise, these two APs are going to be bridging these two distribution systems together. Now, here comes the interesting part. Here, at this precise place, if you go ahead and sniff the wireless frames, you would find that the data frames which are passing from the client to the server have the 2DS and the from DS bits both set to 1. So these are the four combinations of the 2DS and the from DS bits, and I'm hoping that by now you have a clear understanding about how these bits tell us about the direction of the frame that we have just captured. Okay, this was the introduction to what I was going to be talking about. The next thing I'm going to be talking about is the four addresses or the four MAC addresses which are present in the 802.11 MAC frame or MAC header to be more precise. So let's go ahead and wipe this up and have a look at that. Alright, here we are. These are the four MAC address fields that you're going to be finding in the 802.11 MAC header. So let me take it one by one, and let me start off with the easy parts, and let me go to the little more tougher parts. This we were already familiar with, the source MAC address and the destination MAC address. This is nothing but the source address is the source of the Wi-Fi frame. As simple as that. So if you're a client sending packets to the internet, say for example, the source address of this frame would be your client device's MAC address. So this would be the source address of your client, or the original source of the packet, or to be precise, the original source of the frame. The next field which you're going to be talking about, just like source address, the destination address is going to be the final destination MAC address of the frame. Let's say you're going to be sending a frame from, let's say you and your friend are connected to a wireless LAN, and both of you are connected to the same SSID or to the same wireless LAN. If you want to send a frame over to your friend's laptop, say laptop B, the source address of that frame would be your laptop's MAC address, and the destination address of that the destination address of that frame would be the friend's MAC address, the friend laptop's MAC address. These are the two simple components, or these are the two simple addresses out of the four addresses which are pretty clear to understand right from the get-go. Now let's go ahead and have a look at the little more tougher ones. The transmit address and the receiver address. The transmitter address is, if you're going to be talking about how you're going to be defining it, the transmitter address is the address or the MAC address of the person or the device who is responsible for encoding and sending that frame over the wireless network. So the key term for you to remember here is the transmitter address is the address of the person or the client who is going to be sending the frame over the Wi-Fi medium. That's the transmitter address. Similarly, if you use the same logic, the receiver address is the address of the client or is the address of the card who is going to be catching these frames off the wireless medium and using them. So transmitter address and receive address both have a common key point, which is the Wi-Fi medium. These two are basically going to be the start and the end point of the frame, whereas the transmitter address and the receiver address are going to be the actual devices which have sent the Wi-Fi frame through the Wi-Fi medium and the device which is going to be receiving these frames over the Wi-Fi medium. I know what you must be thinking. You must be thinking that why do we need four MAC addresses here? You can see a lot of overlap, right? In many cases, the source address and the transmitter address can be the same. And in many cases, the destination address and the receiver address can also be the same. So now let's go ahead and I'm going to go and tell you why I talked about the 2DS and the from DS bits earlier. The 2DS bits and the from DS bit, along with the four addresses, combine to give something really magical, and that is the different meanings of these four fields in the 802.11 frame. Consider a scenario: you're at a client's premises and you're sniffing their wireless network and you come across a lot of 802.11 frames. Let's consider all of them are data frames for this example. A lot of those frames have, let's say one frame has 3 MAC addresses Another frame has 2 MAC addresses. Another frame has 4 MAC addresses. So the way you can decode, or the way you can understand what the meaning of these MAC addresses are, is if you look at the to DS and from DS bits and you look at the MAC address fields, you can use both to find out the meaning of exactly how this frame is traversing, from where to where is it going, and who is going to be the transmitter, who's going to be the receiver. So these 4 addresses have a lot of other meaning when you mix it along with the to DS and the from DS bits. So let's go ahead and have a look at that. Alright, now here we have the usual good old combinations of the to DS and the from DS bits, and you have a really shabby diagram to the bottom which I'm going to be using for showing you what the meanings, or how the meanings of the 4 MAC addresses change when you look at each use case or each combination here. So let's take the first combination where the to DS bit is 0 and the from DS bit is 1. As we've already found out earlier, this means that the wireless frame that we have captured is coming from the distribution system and it's going to the wireless client. So this frame is going basically from the AP to the client. So now let's have a look at what each of these addresses are going to be. First, let's look at the source address. What is the source address going to be in this case? In this case, the source address is going to be the MAC address of the person, or the MAC address of the server here on the distribution system, who is going to be sending the frame over to the client A. So here, the source address is going to be the address of C. Next, what is going to be the destination address? The destination address is, you guessed it correct, the destination address is the final destination of this frame, and that is nothing but the MAC address of the client A. So the destination address is going to be A's MAC address. So what are the other 2 fields going to be? The transmitter address and the receiver address. Remember what I told you, the transmitter and the receiver address are strictly with respect to the wireless medium. The transmitter is the guy who is going to be sending this packet or modulating the wireless medium and blasting this packet over to the client, and the receiver is the chip or the client who's going to be receiving this packet from the wireless medium. So in our case, since this frame is going to be going from the access point over to the client A, the transmitter address is going to be the access point's BSS ID. So if you already know what a BSS ID means, that's great. If you don't know, BSS ID is the layer 2 identification associated with a BSS. Suppose in an access point you support multiple BSS. So each of these BSSs would have its own virtual MAC address, and this MAC address is known as the BSS ID. So in our case here, since this frame is coming from the access point to the client, the access point has the function of encoding this data into the wireless medium and sending it over. So in our case, the transmitter address is going to be the access point. B. The receiver address, you guessed it correct. Since the client is going to be receiving this frame over the wireless medium, the client's MAC address is going to be the receiver address. So the receiver address is going to be A here. So now we have seen that for this particular case of the to DS bit being 0 and the from DS bit being 1, we have a combination of the 4 MAC addresses, and these 4 MAC addresses represent something. So when you go ahead and sniff this, what you would see is that you would only see 3 MAC addresses present in the 802.11 frame. That's because the DA and the RA are going to be the same, because both the destination, the final destination of the frame, as well as the chip which is going to be receiving this frame over the wireless medium are the same. Great, now that you've understood that, let's dive a little more deeper and have a look at the second combination. The second combination is where the to_ds bit is set to 1 and the from_ds bit is set to 0. You would notice this in a frame which is going from the client. Let me just give me a minute here. I just lost my pointer. Yeah, that's there. So this is going to be noticed in a frame going from the client to the distribution system, or to be more precise, it's going from the client to the AP. So now in this case, let's have a look at what the individual addresses are going to be. What is the source address going to be? I'm going to go fast on this one because I'm sure all of you have caught up. The source address, you're correct, you've guessed it correct, that's going to be the source of the frame, that is the client's MAC address. So the source address is going to be A. What is the destination address going to be? You guessed it again, the final destination address of this frame is going to be the server's address. Next, what is the transmitter address going to be? The transmitter address is the client's address again. Why? That's because the client is in charge of sending this frame over the wireless medium. So in our case here, in this particular combination of the to_ds bit being 1 and the from_ds bit being 0, the transmitter address is the same as the client's address. And the receiver address is going to be the address of the access point, because that is the person, or the access point is the guy who's going to be catching this frame off the wireless medium and using it. So the receiver address is going to be the client's address of B. So here we can see that the source and transmitter address here are one and the same. So earlier we saw that the destination address and the receiver address were the same, but here we said that the source address and the transmitter address are the same. Now you can see what I'm talking about. In each of these cases, the meaning of each of these 4 addresses would change. And it's very important for a wireless engineer to know the importance of the to_ds and from_ds bits and how it influences the MAC addresses. So now let's get into the little more complicated ones. The to_ds bit and from_ds bit both being 0. So what would that mean? Let's try to recall what I said earlier. The to_ds bit and from_ds bit are both zeros in case of control and management frames, because these frames do not have a destination in the DS, or these frames do not originate from the DS. These frames are strictly between the access point and the client. So if we go ahead and sniff a control or management frame, the to_ds and from_ds are going to be like this. The source address of this frame is going to be, let's say this control frame, or let's say this is an authentication request which is going from the client A to the access point B. So here in our case, the source address is going to be A. The destination address is going to be, can you guess? Yes, the destination address is going to be B, because the frame exchange is only between the access point and the client. So in our case here, the source address is A, the destination address is B. So what is the transmitter address going to be? The transmitter address again is the MAC address of the client, and the receiver address is going to be the MAC address of the BSS, or this is going to be the BSS ID. So here we see a much more overlap here. The source and the transmitter address are going to be the same. The destination and the receiver addresses are going to be the same. So this is a special case when both the to_ds and the from_ds bits are going to be 0. Now let's look at the final condition of where the to_ds bit and the from_ds bit are going to be 1. Alright, through the magic of pause, I've gone ahead and modified my shabby diagram to make it even more shabbier. If you thought that wasn't possible, well, look at it, there's proof for you. So what I've done is I've added a scenario where we're going to be using wireless bridges. We have distribution system 1 here, and we have distribution system 2. Both the distribution system are interconnected through the wireless bridge that is between the access points B and X. B and X are going to be configured for bridge mode in this particular configuration, and these two access points are going to be bridging these two distribution systems together. So as we said earlier, if we have both the to DS and the from DS bits as one, that means this frame has been captured traversing a wireless bridge. So in this case, let's have a look at our particular scenario here. Let's say that in our example, the client 2 has requested some frames from the server, and now the server is sending that frame to the client. So keeping that in mind, let's have a look at what the source, let's have a look at what the 4 MAC addresses are going to mean here. The source address in this example is going to be the original source of the frame. You guessed it correct, and that's going to be the server. So in our case, the MAC address of the server is C. What is the destination address going to be? The destination address is going to be the final destination of this frame, that is nothing but client 2's MAC address of Y. Now here's the tricky part. What would the receiver and the transmitter addresses be? Any guesses? Alright, time's up, and I'm sure most of you have got it correct. The transmitter address is going to be the guy who's going to be blasting these packets over the Wi-Fi medium, and that, my friends, is going to be the access point B, because B is the bridge who's going to be sending the frames from the DS1 over to DS2, and the access point X is going to be the other guy who's going to be catching these frames off the wireless medium and integrating them into the DS. So in our case, the transmitter address is going to be B, that is the AP of the DS1, and the receiver address is going to be X. Wow, isn't this really cool? The first time I really learned this, I was like really amazed, because for the first time we have 4 unique MAC addresses in our frame if we're going to be sniffing on a wireless bridge. In any other case, we are maximum going to be seeing only 3 MAC addresses, or 3 unique MAC addresses in an 802.11 MAC header. Only when you're going to be sniffing in a wireless bridge scenario, you're going to be having the good fortune of seeing 4 MAC addresses. So that's it. Thank you for watching. And I'm going to put in a small shameless plug here. I run a small study wiki over, or study wiki, however you call it, over at .11.info. That is the numerals 11.info. And I've basically been studying about wireless technology for just a small amount of time, and I'm just integrating or collecting all the notes that I make when I read a couple of books, or when I find some really cool articles, because there's just ton of knowledge out there, and at least for me, I need for all of it to be organized in one particular place. And before I go, I'd really like to thank the Tweeps for all their wireless contributions, and I really learn a lot from them every day, and they just make my day. So thanks a lot, guys, and thanks for giving me about 20-25 minutes of your precious time, and I hope you liked it. And please feel free to leave your feedbacks and send me your feedbacks on Twitter. My Twitter ID is TACAC, that is TACACK. And if you would like to email me, my email ID is tacac@tacac.com. Thanks a lot. Cheers.